Hello cadets and welcome to another Allegiance tutorial video. My name is Southpaw and today we're going to be discussing combat. When you've seen a few of my gameplay videos, you'll realise that unless my target is big and stationary, I don't tend to hit it very often. So this is more of a do as I say, not do as I do video. But sooner or later in a game, you're going to find something to shoot at, so you'd better have some idea of how. We'll get into the weapon types available in-game a little bit later, and I'm issuing a small maths warning for that section now. But first up, we're going to talk about the theory of combat in Allegiance. And so that you've got something to look at while I ramble on, we're going to need a montage. Even Rocky had a montage. There are two big categories of combat in Allegiance. Ship-to-ship combat, which is between small ships piloted by players or drones. This type of combat is a dogfight using gun mounts, missiles, turrets, and sometimes mines. The second category of combat is ship-to-base combat and involves destroying or capturing bases using medium and capital ships such as bombers or frigates, using anti-base missiles or faction-specific weapons. 99% of Allegiance games are played using the Conquest Victory condition, which requires a team to capture or destroy all of the opponent's tech bases, including their starting garrison, and the combat in-game is all either directly to inflict that damage or to gain the economic upper hand that makes victory easier. In either case, combat has a purpose. Aimless dogfighting in empty back sectors just hurts your team by tying up a valuable resource, that's you, that would be much better deployed elsewhere. There's no concept of dueling in Allegiance. It's a team game in which it's an important skill to pick your fights. Look at the enemy ship. Are they in a better combat ship than you? Do they have better tech? Is the pilot much better than you? Do they have a high kill bonus? Getting involved in a pointless fight only serves to pad the enemy's kill bonus and give you a long, boring and useless pod ride home. Try and outnumber your enemy. Attack them when they're distracted or engaged with something else. Know how and when to run away. Your ship has a booster, the ability to ripcord, or both. Always try and make sure that when you engage there's a purpose, such as podding defenders, destroying ships protecting a miner, a constructor or base, then taking out whatever it was that they were defending. Podding attackers, destroying ships protecting a bomber, a troop transport, or those coming to kill your miners or constructors. Camping, whilst anathema in other games, is a legitimate tactic in Allegiance that relies on good intelligence, timing and teamwork. Camping an Aleph with proximity mine scouts, camping at enemy base's red door with heavy ints, camping a teleport to destroy anything ripping in, these are all important offensive and defensive activities that help to win games. There are counters to each of these tactics that also take teamwork and skill to execute. The tools of the trade, as I've said before, guns, missiles and mines. Different factions have perks that impact the effectiveness of their weaponry, and this is something to take into consideration when you're flying in-game. Factions without missiles, for example, are balanced in other ways, principally with a perk to gun damage. Before we discuss the different weapons, it's important to know that Allegiance uses a range of different armor classes or hull types. In addition to the number of hit points, each ship has an assigned armor class, and the different weapons are optimized differently against each. The armor classes that we'll be referring to later are light armor, used by scouts, fighters, stealth fighters and stealth bombers. Medium armor, used by interceptors, bombers, gunships, heavy troop transports. Utility armor, used by miners, constructors, carriers. Heavy armor, used by capital ships. And base armor. Most factions' bases are impervious to most small weapons found on ships that you can fly. Don't bother shooting the enemy base with your gat guns. You need dedicated anti-base weapons for that. So here we find ourselves in game, and I'm flying very helpfully for this demonstration Belter's Omni Fighter. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the main weapons used in Allegiance and what their strengths and weaknesses are. First of all, draw your attention to some useful pieces of information over here. You see that in my first weapon slot I've got a gat gun level 1, currently loaded. This gives me the effective range of my particles at 600 meters for this gat gun. After that is a damage calculation. You can see in my storage here I've also got utility cannon 1, minigun 1 and a disruptor 1. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the strengths and weaknesses of each of those weapons shortly. First of all, let's have a look at the sector. Somebody's very inconveniently strewn probes across the place, and we're going to clean those up a little bit. So first of all, I'm going to target a probe, and you'll see from this readout down here, it gives me the range. This probe is currently just over 1400 meters away. So I can open up with my gat gun 1 to no effect. I'm comfortably out of that 600 meter range. It's also worth noting that some weapons have different dispersion patterns. You can see the gat particles dispersing there as I fire. It's also worth noting as I fire that for gat guns and miniguns, they use ammo. Ammo is a resource. You can see I've got a spare clip of ammo in my cargo hold, and as I fire, my ammo is decreasing. So let's get a little closer. See if we can't take this probe out with a gat gun. 800 meters into range, you can see the damage, and the target is destroyed. So the gat gun is a jack of all trades. We'll talk at the end of this video about where the weapons are optimized against different armor types. But the gat is the primary weapon of scouts and fighters. It's a medium range weapon. The projectiles have some spread and it uses ammo. One of the other options available at the start of the game is the disruptor cannon. Now, the disruptor cannon is an energy weapon. So as I fire the disruptor, you can see ever so slight movement in my available energy scale over here. If I had a full load out of 3 and they were high level disruptors, you'd see that drop quite quickly. The point when you run out of energy firing an energy weapon, your projectiles stop or they come out in a sort of sputtering way. You're also going to note that my disruptor's got ever such slightly higher range than my gat. So let's see how we get on now with a disruptor against the target. So hopefully you can see that took many more shots. The disruptor is a bit of an interesting weapon. Again, primarily mounted by scouts and fighters, medium range with little to no spread. The Dis 1 has got no real energy limit. You can fire it more or less indefinitely. But it has very low base damage. It is, I'll show you later, it's heavily optimized against shields and heavy class hull, taking quite a long time to destroy that probe, as you saw. So onto the minigun, favourite weapon of the vast majority of Allegiance pilots. The minigun is the primary armament for interceptor class ships. The first thing to note is that the minigun's range is significantly shorter than that of the gat, 400 meters as opposed to 600 meters. The other thing as I fire to watch is the spread. Minigun's a pretty inaccurate weapon. It's got really quite considerable spread even in the mid-range of its 400 meters. So let's approach another one of these pesky probes, show it who's boss. We'll leave that one. So I'll open fire at 400 meters. You'll see the effect of the spread. You can see the particles there landing all across the target. So really, when you're using the minigun, you need to watch the fly of your shot and adjust accordingly, particularly if you've got them in more than one mount, which of course your interceptors will have. Minigun also, ammo user. When you're flying an interceptor, particularly a heavy interceptor, you need to really husband your ammo quite carefully. You can chew through clips of ammo at quite a frightening rate with a minigun. However, it's worth noting that it has a high damage output. It is pretty weak against utility hull, so minor hull, but that's offset to an extent by its increased damage. So let's talk now about the utility cannon. The utility cannon is the primary weapon of stealth fighters. It's another energy weapon, so as I fire it, you'll see my energy gauge here starting to deplete. It's pretty long range, 750 meters. And again, like the disruptor, features virtually no spread. Very accurate weapon. So you can see against the probe here, it's somewhere between the GAT and the disruptor in terms of its effectiveness. Now the beauty of the utility cannon is that it is heavily optimized against utility hull, so miners and constructors principally, but also carriers. 2 of these on a stealth fighter with a decent kill bonus will take out a target miner in a matter of seconds. Very effective weapon against those targets, less effective against many others. So there are other weapons in the game that you may come across. Some of them are a little bit esoteric. Something like snipers, AC autocannons, mini autocannons, skycap turrets. We'll leave all of those for another video and spend a little bit of time now talking about the different basic missiles in the game.
Welcome home. Ship is repaired, rearmed, and ready.
So it'll be hard to show you some of the properties of the missiles on the setup that I've got, given that I've got friendly fire on and I'm targeting friendly probes. But we'll talk to them anyway, and we'll see how we get on. So the 4 basic missile types. Short-range missile dumbfire. The dumbfire has the lowest tracking capability of all of the missiles. It tracks slowly and badly. Really best when used in a straight line or just off a straight line. The Hunter, long range, high tracking, only mountable by stealth fighters and a couple of other vessels. The Hunter, in conjunction with the utility cannon, makes the stealth fighter a very dangerous foe indeed. The quickfire will be the hardest to show you. It's a relatively long range, low damage, but very high rate of fire missile. It acquires targets, acquires a target lock very quickly, hence the name, and allows you to fire quite a lot of them in quick succession. Quickfire's primary usage is against targets that you need to acquire a lock on quickly, that you don't have eye on for very long, so hostile stealth fighters or stealth bombers. Possibly edge cases like the RICS, station drones, other good uses of the quickfire missile. The Seeker is probably your all-round missile. Lower damage than a dumbfire, but better tracking, better lock capabilities. In the hands of a beginner pilot, certainly at the lower Seeker levels, this is probably the best missile to use for dogfighting, although its damage output will be much lower than your guns, so you shouldn't rely on it. Seeker, as you can see in this core, got longer range than the quickfire, shorter range than the Hunter, and damage is about 60% that of a dumbfire. So again, primary usage of Seekers is as a dogfighting missile on your fighter if you're not confident with your skills with the dumbfire. Or taking out probes. So we're going to dock up here
Autopilot engaged.
and summarize what we've talked about. So in summary, when you're thinking about what weapons to take out and outfit, you really need to run a few calculations. What ship are you flying, and therefore what weapons are available? What kind of targets do you think you're going to be engaging, and therefore what kind of hull they have, what tech you have available, and really what your preferences are as a pilot. If you're flying a fighter or a scout, in almost all circumstances you want to take the Gatling gun. This is your jack of all trades. It's got a medium base damage, and it's not really weak against any of the armor types. By comparison, the Disruptor has about half of the base damage of the Gatling gun. It is heavily optimized against heavy hull, which is capital ship class, and optimized against shields. So really one of the few times you're going to want to take the Disruptor is if you are going hunting for capital ships. Minigun is your only choice for the vast majority of interceptor class ships, so you don't have to think too much about that. Worth noting that the minigun's base damage is the highest of the basic weapons available. It suffers a nerf against utility hull, which is minor hull, but if you've got 3 Mini 3s, that's not going to bother you at all. And then finally, the utility cannon, again, standard equipment for the stealth fighter. Really very strong against utility hull, as you'd expect, will shred miners and constructors in seconds, and is probably the best choice for the vast majority of the time that you would spend in a stealth fighter. So it's been a pretty quick video this time around. I hope you found it useful, and I look forward to catching up with you guys in the next video.